Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today here. Welcome to our live RiskPal demo. I'm Diana Almeida. My title is Product and Account Manager. I'm responsible for customer success and product development here at RiskPal. And I'm joined today by Tom Bacon, who is RiskPal's COO. I'm sure probably a lot of you have met him at USHA or have come through that. And Tom will be running the actual demo. This video is being recorded. I think you may have noticed that. We will share the video later this week if you wish to share with other colleagues or just recap on anything that's been said here. So why are we doing this today? Because as we all know, it's completely timely to discuss this matter of risk assessments in the university sector. We do continue to see large volume of institutions that struggle a lot on how to manage the risk assessment practices and still using very document-based processes that give actually little central oversight to what's happening. While there is this appetite and want to change, there is also this perception that it can be the change in the software implementation present lots of hurdles. So with this demo, we hope to demonstrate that this does not need to be the case. And hopefully 2025 could be the time to make this change. So Tom, if we could just quickly go over onto our agenda.
Yep, certainly.
I'm hoping everyone can see that. If not, just please put your hand up and let us know. Should be working fine. So just going over briefly through our agenda points here. Today, we're going to try and keep this webinar to 45 minutes. We know everyone has a very hectic schedule nowadays, and especially going on to the year ending, we need to start wrapping things up. So we'll be looking at the following issues. So first, risk assessment pain points. We will briefly address the common issues universities face on the subject of risk assessment and what is happening right now. Then we're moving on to software implementation hurdles and tips. So we will be discussing a few myths around, the software implementation, and also a few tips on what you could and should do when you are implementing either a brand new software that you've never used before or just changing processes. And then we will be doing a what we call a RiskPal snapshot. And why snapshot? Because exactly due to these time constraints, we will be doing a shorter version than what we'll be doing in a complete demo. But Tom will definitely provide information later on how you can see more of RiskPal, schedule meetings, have a complete demo, have one-on-ones, as well as, and please keep an eye for this. At the end, Tom will discuss and give some information on an exclusive trial offer that we will be giving only to the people who are here today. So only the attendees of this event will benefit or possibly benefit from that exclusive trial offer. So more on that later. Tom will come back to that. And then obviously to end our Q&A, so if you could just please, I encourage you to use the box at the bottom for questions, and we will go hopefully through all of them, if not all of them, at least the majority of them at the end of the session. If we do skip any or leave any unanswered, we will get back to you. So I think it's time to pass it over to you, Tom.
Great. Thanks, Diana, and thanks everyone for joining today. Just echoing Diana's words, we are really grateful for you taking the time out to hear about this webinar and presentation. And looking forward, I will just move on to the first area, which is around the risk assessment headaches and the issues that we see universities commonly facing. And this is on the basis of our engagement in the sector over the last couple of years. Number one, looking at the world of Word, document dilemmas and formatting fears. So apart from showing our ability to do some basic alliteration, what this talks about is really the fundamentals to the heart of the issue that we see, which are bad user experience leading to poor engagement and ultimately bad risk assessments. Word documents, various template formats, issues with version control, formatting tables, different documents being lost, stored in different areas, or in parts of the intranet within an institution that are not always too accessible or user-friendly, let's say, are one of the core features of risk assessment that we see in university institutions. What that leads to is inconsistent engagement, because it starts on the footing of bad user experience, but also increasingly academic institutions have a challenge at times with perceptions of risk ownership. So often academics or individual departments or school heads will not perceive the risk ownership sits with them, and will see it more as an area or remit of responsibility for your heads of health and safety, security, for example, in travel. And that barrier, combined with poor university and poor user experience around risk assessment, can often lead to gaps in compliance and completion of required risk assessments. There are evidently a vast array of diverse risk assessment needs across university institutions, whether that's regarding travel, fire, laboratory and experimentation, regarding some really niche work around chemicals, pathogens and the like, microorganisms that you will all be familiar with into your day-to-day work. Open days, events, campus security, the requirements are diverse. What we see there are evidently a lot of disjointed systems and templates, and as a result of that, often variable standards and variable levels of compliance. And fundamentally, what that leads to is an absence of oversight, challenges with getting effective reporting, and when it comes to both internal and external auditing, gaps or a lot of legwork that goes into trawling through different folders, identifying risk assessment practices, and no benefits of data oversight in those requirements. More recently, we have seen in the last couple of years, institutions also having long-term central IT strategies that are determining what systems and software can be used for your particular risk assessment requirements. That can create onboarding of new systems, make it very difficult. That combined with the classic procurement hurdles and speed not being the quickest within university institutions, those two elements combined, along with new budgetary pressures that we're increasingly seeing across the sector, can evidently create a reluctance to engage and change, and perceptions that the effort you might have to modernize risk assessment practices in your institution is a mountain too high to climb. It need not be that way. Evidently, it is no mean feat, or it is a big task in terms of change management more broadly, whether that's the implementation of software and or change in behaviors and safety culture within an organization. But there are a few areas that we've seen in terms of implementation of new systems that can really help with regards to implementation. First, and these are just a couple, I'll share some articles at the end which are about change management and tips for that. But I think the things that we've seen and where the successes can really work are in terms of an implementation plan. First and foremost, don't go it alone. Work with your teams and key stakeholders outside of your departments. If you're in a safety department, for example, which I think a lot of our attendees are today, is engaging others from other core departments to help you with the rollout of a plan will be very important. They will become your advocates as you look to wider rollout of new processes in the future and as a software package expands. Factor in the procurement early on is a essential tip, because a failure to do so and only engaging procurement, whether that's through IT or data privacy or legal at a late date, can really derail a project or significantly slow it down. And that comes really to the last point, which is about timeframe realism versus inertia. We've been involved in tenders where the target date for rollout across a whole institution has been within the space of 2 months, only to see that the decision on the chosen party is on that second month, and therefore there is an element of unrealistic timeframes around that versus inertia. So inertia is, think about in your implementation plan, the quick wins and the milestones throughout, which will make the rollout be a success. Because what you don't want to do is have a 2-year plan that only really kicks in after year 1. And by that point, your stakeholders you've engaged in a plan are already tired and are already working on different projects and have not seen a progress in terms of the rollout that you're looking at. Lastly, just ask of your vendors, or if you are working with third parties, what their support is around training, around implementation, because it's really important that you do partner. If you are working with third parties, that you partner with them on any implementation plans, agree measures of success throughout a program, and also, some key milestones to achieve. So we talked about, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there. We talked about the snapshot and the product. So what does RiskPal do? We are fundamentally driven by using the benefits of digital platforms to improve user experience, improve oversight reporting, and tackle those issues that we mentioned are common in university risk assessment. We've built a platform that is easy to use, but fundamentally is easy to configure. So you can build out risk assessment templates that are fit for purpose for your diverse needs across your institution. What I will show in short is the risk assessment workflow, the integrated approvals, the ability to have oversight of activities across an institution and by department, the ability to have audit logs and records on risk assessment approval, and the ease in which you can configure the system to build out templates and content or safety protocols that are required for you as an organization. So looking at the process, here is your dashboard. Everything, I should just note, in RiskPal is permissions driven. So you have different users, which is very common in SaaS platforms. Everything is permissions driven by your role type and your organizational profile. And what I have done, given the time constraints and a bit of in a Blue Peter fashion, is I have pre-built some risk assessment examples to show you today to get a feel for how the user journey works for risk assessment. So I will create the risk assessment. I'm going to use this Egypt engineering trip first and foremost to demonstrate the capability around travel before we look at a lab risk assessment, and then to show you the end product around a fire risk assessment. So I'm doing a few diverse examples to just highlight how you can use the system. Primarily, this is the area I'm going to be using, but if you're creating a new risk assessment, just to highlight, you will have choice from a series of templates. These are all examples for your purposes, everything from events, open days, graduations, fire risk assessment, office, lab, specifics in a lab around genetically modified microorganisms. That was hard to say. International travel, field work, work placement, global partnerships. You build these out according to the template requirements that you have. Just to emphasize, these are just examples. But I will go back because filling out the risk assessment, we won't have time to do so today. So I'll show you the journey. This was an example for the Egypt Engineering Field Trip and Conference. Taking place later this month for the engineering department. All of these are drop-down fields, which when we set up your environment, we would configure this to the schools, departments that take place within your, within your institution. Project members, this again, we would integrate with your Active Directory or single sign-on service to be able to pull down from a user list. You have an approving management cycle, and you can also, here's a travel assessors, you can embed group emails, for example, safety@institution.ac.uk, which would allow teams to get notifications when certain risk assessments are sent. Travel overview, travel itinerary, here is just some example content. You can provide any attachments in your risk assessment. All of these fields are entirely customizable. And when we see later an example of a lab risk assessment and others which we'll demonstrate, you can see the fields here are all varied according to the purpose of that template. So moving on. Here you'll have the country information. Evidently, if this is a UK campus event, this is not going to exist in that template, but this is for travel. And here we take a third-party API feed from Crisis24, which gives you information to your country threat profile and recent incidents. Those of you here familiar with this remit will be familiar with these types of services. But important to note, you are also able to customize. Here we are in the University of RiskPal example, where you can customize based on your own institution's experience, practice, protocols. You can configure your country pages. So if you are doing repeat activity or visits, for example, on field work or conferences, or if you have a campus or franchise in another another country, you can input here key information around that destination that you want to share with all users. So the idea is over time, you build institutional knowledge that you are then able to share with all users. That is not dependent on particular individuals having that knowledge within the organization. Because as we know, not when individuals can leave, institution knowledge can often walk out the door as well. So moving forward into the risk and mitigation section, every template has a series of pre-built, and you will determine this when you are building the risk assessment templates, questions or activities and hazards pertinent to that task. Here in the travel example, we have information pertaining to travel, transport, accommodation, working practices, well-being, just taking some examples. And the idea is the template serves as a prompt for those areas that need to be answered. Let's take, and those which are not relevant would not be required to fill out. Let's take, for example, working alone or working at night after dark, just as an example. When you are selecting this area, you will be given from the library a series of guidance. All this guidance is entirely customizable, and the end user is able to input their controls and mitigations. Okay. Doing this very quickly because of time, so evidently the mitigations here might be more extensive. What I will highlight with the other examples, for example, I mentioned the lab and the fire, is these fields, again, you can add additional fields and the content can look quite different. You can have risk matrices applied, which we will come to show you in a moment. I'm just going to save that. And you can have information regarding ethics, for example. All of this is configurable when you are building out your templates. Just to highlight, if something in the template, there is something missing, you can also go to our library of extensive information. Let's say we needed something on, actually, let's look at extreme heat being a concern. Okay, extreme heat or humidity might be relevant for this trip. You have the ability to look it up, derive that information, and add that, therefore, into your risk assessment, which we can see has been pulled in here, and we can then complete that information as well. Any content, ease of use, you can move according to orders, etc., as you require. There's a communication section. In this case, this is pulling in the information of the individuals based on the essential info. This would be your emergency contacts information. This is pre-populated at a template level if you have internal teams. Equally, if this is your facilities, you're doing your office risk assessment or firework, this would be your central facilities and estates team details. So it doesn't need to be solely through the prism of travel. That's just the one example I'm demonstrating now. And here is where, from the template, you can push central information to your users. Because what we see, one of the biggest frustrations people have in filling out risk assessments is having to repeat, enter the same information for every new risk assessment, copy paste from a document, whether it's a phone number, it's email address, it's a protocol, over and over again. These are the things that wear people out when filling in risk assessments. So you then have and the opportunity to provide any other information. You can customize, preview your PDF. So anything that you want to do there, you can turn on, off, really configure that, review, see what that looks like. So you can just do it before you submit it. I'll show you after this a full example. So this is just an example of how you can brand your PDF. I will show you a full, complete risk assessment example in a moment through the prism of a fire risk assessment, but this is just to show how you can preview that information. Evidently, a lot of this is blank at the moment because we didn't fill it out during this presentation. But what I want to highlight is then the submission process. You then have the ability to submit this. This would go to the project members. If you don't want them notified at this stage, you can do that. The group and the approving manager. I will just keep that brief for now. That is then submitted. Email, copy of the risk assessment are sent. The approving manager and project members are notified. Project members can collaborate and participate in the risk assessment. And the approving manager, having received that notice, will then come into RiskPal, look in their pending risk assessments, and they will see the following. Okay, so this is the one we just submitted. This is a pathogen and a laboratory testing and a Malawi visit. These are my risk assessments that right now I need to review and approve. The process to do that is very straightforward. And in the same way that anyone can collaborate, participants can add their information. Changes are logged as part of a log chain, which I'll highlight. And then the approving manager has the option to approve this, request more information, or forward it on for further approval. In this case, I will just approve the process. I might share it, in this case, with Adrian Adams, and I would include the note. All these comms are then stored. The risk assessment is approved, and it moves out of the pending risk assessments, and it sits in a central risk assessment register. So the issue we talked about earlier about oversight of activities within your department or across the institution is what this risk assessment register helps overcome. If you are member only of, for example, the humanities team, you will only see the humanities risk assessments. Likewise, if you're on facilities and estates, you will only see the facilities and estates risk assessments. If you are in a central safety function and might sit across the whole organization, you will then evidently sit across the whole organization, see all the risk assessments, which I can do from here. The aspects which this also gives, as well as the oversight I mentioned around the logs and the ability to see the process. I'm now going to jump to this fire risk assessment because I know some of our attendees are interested in that remit, to show the final PDF of what that can look like, but also importantly the log process. And this is what it looks like. So in this case, Adrian Adams no, let's go back a step. Simon Scholar completed the library risk assessment for review, and it went to Adrian Adams, who then undertook a series of edits, which you're able to review, the sections that were edited, and even having done that, requested more information. They said testing schedules are overlooked. Please complete the highlighted section. You can see that Simon was notified of that from here. Simon then came in, provided edits. More information was submitted along with a note of thanks. This has now been updated, and then the process was approved. When it was approved, Davina Sanders, Simon Scholar, Paula Proctor were all notified, and the risk assessment was there. So from an auditing perspective, if you ever needed to look back, you can see the process of a risk assessment and how that process went. Looking at the PDF example, because you can access those as well. Here's an example of what that would look like. So you have the risk assessment. This is a library building fire assessment, the dates it was completed, the author, the approving manager, the date of approval. As I showed earlier, all of these are configurable in terms of when you're building out the PDF, if you want certain sections included or not. And what you get here, scope location details, you can provide additional attachments within here as well. Any other information, your communication protocols. And then we've got here is your risk and mitigation section. I mentioned earlier around some templates having the matrices. If you work on a 3x3 rather than a 5x5 scale as well, all configurable when we would set you up in the system. And what you can see here is just a project oversight. So the first one being, facilities, backup, power supplies, generators in this case, relates to here. You've got the specific controls mitigations that are being undertaken and the general guidance from the library as well within that. So this is a snapshot really of what that would look like. And these are the areas that we would look at. Just to highlight this, what would be within this, so you can see this outside of the PDF documentation as well. Let's take the library building fire risk assessment that we mentioned. As you can see here, scope location details. This field is specific to the fire risk assessment template, as is the content for fire safety for premises. So there's nothing in this template talking about travel, civil unrest, protest, because you're customizing your templates and the content on the basis of what specific requirements are. So when we look at having a institution-wide platform to serve different purposes, then the idea of having different access and different templates and the ability to configure those is exactly it. Because what you don't want to have is central templates that are trying to be all singing, all dancing for all purposes. And this would be within this, what you can see are the areas and the guidance and the content across, and I'm just picking some examples here, in this case, fire doors, compartments, these areas. But what I'll show you now is the library itself and how you as risk management professionals can actually configure and change and add, enhance, edit this information, because the RiskPal library does not profess to have everything, and I'm going to show you that with regards to both this fire content and also importantly with the example of a open day and graduation. I will, just before doing that, I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, give one other example just of this, because I did mention labs earlier. So we talked about in fact, that I apologize, I believe I've just clicked on the wrong one. So let me just check. Pathogen in laboratory testing. Similar principle, structure, but evidently what you see here is there's no country profile section, there's no communications tab in this example, just because it isn't required for this purpose. So what we've got here is your description of task, your list of individuals and their competence for task. And within the risk and mitigation section, okay, it's very different again, right? We're looking at lab risk, And these fields, we're talking about chemicals, and we're talking about genetically modified microorganisms. Okay. What I will now highlight is, in short, how easy it is to configure the system. I will then just show you about building templates and configuring those templates. And then lastly, look at a quick look at the analytics capability of this system. So within RiskPal, certain administrators can customize the content. Within this risk library, there is extensive information. Let's first take as this was the example we looked at, fire safety for premises. If you wanted to edit, change, update any of this content, it's very easy to do. Let's just take this dry and wet risers. Okay. Here, apologies, typing is proving too challenging. So this is where you would update, you can delete, you can highlight, you can change the content according to your specific requirements. Equally, as well as updating the existing RiskPal library, what you're able to do is create your own content. And in the theme of Blue Peter, again, here's one I made earlier with regards to open day and graduation. So here's an example of, I have within the University of RiskPal, perhaps I'm a safety officer, or I'm an events coordinator, or I'm in the safety team. I have created, because the system didn't have it, a body around open day and graduation. Okay. We've got information relating to campus safety and public access, central piazza access. If I'm on a campus, I've got piazza, conference center and presentations. But let's say, and this is stuff I've added, but just to show how easy it is to create new content, I might also need something on conference center evac planning. Okay. Here is where my protocols go. And just for the brevity of today, I'll just add this in. That is then saved, added to my central library. Right? What I then want to do is make sure that this content is pulled into my open day and graduation template. So I would come here, I would look at the templates, I'd find the template list. And here we are, events, open days, graduations. This is my template. We're determining we don't need the country profile. We don't want supplier information in this case. We might actually determine this is only relevant to, for example, just the facilities and estates team. This is when we choose if we want the matrix attended. So this is what I'm showing you now, is how easy it is to configure the templates initially. And here we see there's information from events, work in practice, open day, graduation. We've got 2 areas already included, but actually I need to include this conference center presentations and the conference central evac planning that we just created in here. And in doing so, there's your comms section, just to highlight everything. Can be edited here. If you want to assign overall project risk scoring as well, you're able to do that. And what we've done in doing that is just updated the central template, and therefore anyone creating a new risk assessment for open days and graduations will have the latest information in the risk assessment. So what we're doing really is harnessing or getting the benefits of central libraries of content, which will then pull through into your templates. So if at any point going forward, just going back here in the library, we saw this a lot with COVID, and I'm sure many of you dealt with COVID protocols as well, is when they were changing so quickly and rapidly, the ability to have a central function or central library to update the information. Let's take this example. In providing this update now to this advice, it will then transpose across all the templates. So they will then be working with the latest information, and that doesn't require you to individually go through every template, update all the content, which is an issue that you get often with document-based solutions. I am going to wrap just purely to show from a reporting point of view, looking at the analytics capability within RiskPal. You are able to generate data, graphics, which can be exported on the basis of risk behaviors in your institution. So if you're looking at, for example, here we've got by department, the different volumes of risk assessments that are taking place, your user volumes, for example, different country locations if you have a travel remit. And some of this information can be quite useful with regards to understanding risk behaviors within your institution, also looking at compliance gaps perhaps and behaviors. But if you're talking as well to insurance, or you need to provide internal management reporting, this can be quite a useful way of doing that. And you can configure your data sets as well by building out your graphics, the areas that you want included here, the departments, the relevant, and the different line types of graphing that you want to build. On that, I think that was the RiskPal sort of snapshot. I will just highlight that before we move to the Q&A, there are a few articles of interest that cover some of the aspects that we've discussed, looking at change management and barriers when implementing SaaS or software, ideas around producing a robust risk assessment, irrespective of the activity at hand. And then there's a few areas around digitalizing travel risk specifically, if that remit is something that you are responsible and look after. We are more than available if you would like to see more of the platform and have a one-on-one discussion and a detailed demo, clearly flown through that version. And we would be happy to organize that with you, and one of the team will follow up following today on that. We also provide risk management consultancy if you're at the beginning of or in an evaluating stage of looking at your risk management protocols in your organization, then we'll be happy to discuss that with you. And as Deanna alluded to earlier, we are offering exclusive trial access for a discounted fee for a 6-month trial for all users and attendees of this webinar today. And we'll be providing more information and following up with you on that. What we found with some of the institutions we've worked with, and when we talked earlier around some of those hurdles of onboarding and procurement and change management, is we found that 3 6-month trial programs really do help embed solutions into your institution, and they're far more affordable at the outset in terms of if you need to get something done quickly, and could be a good way for you to test pilot a program at the time of next year when you are looking to hopefully change your risk assessment practices. So with that, Deanna, thank you. Do we have any questions that have come in? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I definitely am. I was going to ask, we don't have any questions in the chat yet, but I would want to know if anyone has any either comments. You are muted, but we can allow you to speak. So just raise your hand if you would like to do any comment or ask any questions.
And Deanna, you know the system as well, if not better than me. I mean, is there anything from the demo in terms of the platform that would be worth highlighting, you feel?
Just the first impact when we've never seen RiskPal, and it does seem like a lot of information. And the feedback that I usually get from clients, and I do most of the trainings and the onboardings as well as with the trial clients, is that the more you play with the system, the more intuitive it gets. So we do also have a rollout plan, and we kind of give you on hand support most of the way. So at first it's like, oh my God, I got the first part, but the other part is kind of gone. We also have a very complete and thorough help suite. So it is just a question of looking through calmly at your own time, especially if you have the trial, and then the second and third time when you get the gist and how it works, and it really simplifies the way things are made, and especially for the end user, which is obviously the point, right? To keep them safe, remind them of what is important, and take like the hassle out of all the admin part. Yeah, you're showing the help suite, right, Tom? Thank
Yeah, I
you.
was just
Thank you
showing
for
that.
that. Yeah, thank you for that.
So it does.
Yeah. So it's divided also like for the permission levels, like we've discussed. So users are all of us, even if we have higher levels. It's about the basics of what Tom went through, the creation of risk assessments, and then the manager guides. It's when you also do approvals, and that's a very easy, like Tom also showed. And then the admin, which is all the configurable part of RiskPal, and that's usually the part where we dive most into and set time aside to, at the onset, fill it in with all the information we need. So then it's perfectly set up for the needs of any given institution.
Great, thanks, Deanna. So I think if we haven't got any questions, I'd just conclude by thanking you all for joining the webinar today. Miraculously, we are within time, which is good. Myself, Deanna, or one of the other team will follow up with you in the next couple of days, just as a thanks and a follow-up note, and we'll also send a recording of this. But please, in the interim or following this, do feel free to reach out if you would like to explore more of the system, you have questions, or would like to go over anything else with us.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.